Hello again, everybody, and welcome back to the Bible Difficulties and Answers podcast. I'm Lance Smith, and this is episode 273. Thanks for spending a little time with me today, whether you're driving through traffic, enjoying a quiet morning with a cup of coffee, or listening while mowing the lawn. And if you're mowing the lawn, hopefully you're almost done. I appreciate you tuning in. Today, we're tackling one of the hardest chapters in the entire Old Testament. Actually, scratch that. It's one of the hardest. It's found in Numbers 31, and it comes from the Big Book of Bible Difficulties by Norman Geisler and Thomas Howe. Here's the question. According to Numbers 31, Moses commanded the Israelites to destroy the Midianites. Every male was killed. The women and children were taken captive. Their cities were burned. Then Moses ordered the death of every male child and every woman who had been sexually active, while sparing only the young virgin girls. Now, how could that possibly be morally right? If you've ever stumbled over this chapter, or if a skeptic has pointed to it and said, "Explain that one," you're certainly not alone. And frankly, if this chapter doesn't make you stop and think, you probably haven't read it carefully enough. As a father and grandfather, I don't breeze past verses about children. I feel the emotional weight of them. That's one reason I think it's important not to give easy answers to difficult questions. Instead, let's do what we always try to do on this podcast. Let's slow down. Let's look at the context, because context in Scripture is a little like putting together a jigsaw puzzle. One piece by itself can look confusing. Put the surrounding pieces in place, and suddenly the picture begins to make sense. So let's look at the context. Numbers 31 doesn't happen in a vacuum. Earlier, in Numbers 25, Israel experienced one of its darkest moments. The Midianites, working alongside the Moabites, didn't attack Israel with swords first. They attacked with temptation. Following Balaam's counsel, they deliberately enticed Israelite men into sexual immorality and idol worship at Baal Peor. Sometimes the most dangerous attack isn't the one you can see coming. A nation can survive an army at the border more easily than corruption inside its own camp. History has shown us that more than once. That's exactly what's happening here. The result was devastating. 24,000 Israelites died in God's judgment. Then, in Numbers 31, 1-2, the Lord tells Moses, "On behalf of the people of Israel, take revenge on the Midianites for leading them into idolatry. After that, you will die and join your ancestors." Notice something important. This isn't Moses waking up on the wrong side of the tent. This isn't Israel deciding they wanted more land. The text in many translations repeatedly calls this the Lord's vengeance. Moses sends 12,000 soldiers under the leadership of Phinehas, the same priest whose decisive action had ended the rebellion in Numbers 25. The Midianite men were killed, including their 5 kings and Balaam himself. When the soldiers returned with the women and children alive, Moses is furious. He asks, "Why have you let all the women live?" These are the very ones who followed Balaam's advice and caused the people of Israel to rebel against the Lord at Mount Peor. He then commands the death of every boy and every woman who has known a man, while sparing the young virgin girls. There's no getting around it. It's a difficult passage, and pretending it isn't doesn't help anybody. So why would God command this? Why was this morally justified? First, this wasn't arbitrary violence. It was divine judgment. Gleason Archer, quoted in the Precept Austin commentary, explains that the Midianites had deliberately conspired to seduce Israel into idolatry and immorality, making themselves liable to God's judgment. David Guzik says something similar in his Enduring Word commentary, reminding us that this was the Lord's vengeance, not Israel settling a personal score. That distinction matters. A judge sentencing a convicted criminal isn't committing murder. He's carrying out justice that someone else has earned through their actions. Scripture presents God as the ultimate judge. Second, the Midianites were not innocent victims caught in the middle of history. They intentionally sought Israel's spiritual destruction. Their weapon wasn't simply military force, it was religious corruption. If Satan couldn't defeat Israel from the outside, he'd try to destroy them from the inside. And sadly, it almost worked. Third, this command came directly from God. Christians believe God alone is both creator and judge. The one who gives life also has the authority to take it. None of us possesses that authority over another human being. God does. That's a difficult truth, but it's foundational to understanding passages like this. Fourth, this judgment protected Israel's future. The women singled out by Moses were the same ones who had participated in the seduction at Baal Peor. The concern wasn't ethnicity, it was continued corruption. The text doesn't spell out what became of every surviving girl, but elsewhere in the Mosaic Law, particularly Deuteronomy 21, we see protections governing the treatment of female captives. GotQuestions.org summarizes the issue well, saying that the moral justification ultimately rests on God's right to judge sin, and that the Midianites were experiencing the consequences of their own actions. Likewise, the Apologetics Press article, The Killings of Numbers 31, points back to God's earlier command in Numbers 25, showing this wasn't an unexpected outburst, but the fulfillment of previously announced judgment. But what about the skeptics? Now, let's be fair. This passage has generated some serious criticism. Richard Dawkins, in his 2006 documentary, The Root of All Evil, asked how Moses' actions are morally different from Hitler's invasion of Poland or Saddam Hussein's attacks on the Kurds. Christopher Hitchens in God is Not Great and in Debates pointed to passages like this as evidence that biblical morality is fundamentally flawed. Seth Andrews in Deconverted said passages like Numbers 31 were among the reasons he lost his faith, describing them as genocide and infanticide, while arguing that many Christians simply don't have satisfying answers. Those are serious objections. They're real questions, and they deserve real answers. Matthew Ingeda addresses the concerns in his article, Did God Command Genocide in Numbers 31? He argues this was a unique, historically limited act of divine judgment, not a blanket command to exterminate ethnic groups. Similarly, the Christian think tank examines many of the common accusations surrounding this chapter and challenges several assumptions often made about the text. Personally, I think one of the biggest mistakes people make is reading Numbers 31 as though it were describing 21st century political warfare, as though Moses were writing tomorrow morning's newspaper. It isn't. This wasn't imperial expansion. It wasn't racial hatred. It wasn't ethnic cleansing. It was judicial judgment against a specific people for specific actions at a specific moment in redemptive history. In fact, Midianites appear again later in Scripture, demonstrating this wasn't the total extermination many critics assume. That tells us the language here shouldn't automatically be understood as meaning every single Midianite everywhere ceased to exist. Friends, Numbers 31 isn't meant to be an easy chapter. It's meant to remind us that sin isn't merely making mistakes. Sin destroys. It destroys families. It destroys nations. And ultimately, it separates people from a holy God. Thankfully, that's not where the story ends. The same God who judged sin in the Old Testament also made a way for sinners to escape judgment through Jesus Christ. Justice wasn't ignored, it was satisfied at the cross. God didn't sweep sin under the rug, He dealt with it completely in Jesus. If you're wrestling with this passage, I'd encourage you to spend some extra time reading Numbers 25 alongside Numbers 31. They really belong together. And remember what Isaiah 55, 8-9 tells us. God's thoughts are higher than ours, and His ways are far beyond anything you could imagine. That doesn't mean we stop asking questions. It means we ask them with humility, trusting that the Judge of all the earth always does what is right. If today's episode helped you, I'd love to hear from you. You can email me at BibleDifficultiesAndAnswers@gmail.com, join the discussion on Facebook, or support the podcast at buymeacoffee.com/Lance Smith. You can also find every episode at BibleDifficultiesAndAnswers.podbean.com. Next Friday, we'll move into Numbers 33, 44-49. Why is the list of places Israel stopped different here from the one stated earlier in Numbers 21? Another interesting Bible difficulty that looks like a contradiction at first glance. Until then, I'm Lance Smith, wishing you good health, good study, and God's richest blessings. So long, everybody.